Good afternoon, everyone. We are back at House Human Services, resuming our testimony that was interrupted by the Zoom outage yesterday afternoon on page 248, the CCFAP, childcare CCFAP supplemental grants payments to providers. Thank you, Janet, for being so flexible and being able to attend. I know we were a little bit late on the floor, so we appreciate your flexibility and your willingness to come back and finish telling us about the bill. Yeah. So I'm gonna turn the floor to you.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be back, if this time virtually, but so
Oh, Janet, we can't hear you that well.
Okay. I think my headphones weren't in the right spot. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
So good afternoon. So again, nice to see folks again. Janet McLaughlin, Deputy Commissioner in the Department for Children and Families, overseeing the Child Development Division, and happy to continue testimony on H248. So yesterday we really just mostly got through the supplemental child care grants or the emergency financial relief grants. And then today, I was starting to touch on the parts related to changes to the child care financial assistance program. And I guess, we started talking about changes to the child care financial assistance program. And so yesterday we did cover the fact that we need to do grants and contracts for some portion, right, of child care financial assistance program eligible children, and we need to do it with at least some of the programs for some specific service needs. And so we talked about how what's in the law was just designed to give us the two pathways that are going to need to be in place, and there's an or in there, so it just sort of, it's one or the other, and we're going to be designing it and starting to and ideally starting to pilot it with with moving ideally to continuing to grow out this pathway as we learn more.
And Janet, can I pause you for 1 second? We kind of started talking about this a little bit yesterday, but do you anticipate that if additional resources are needed within like the business office or other areas, I'm just thinking about if the number of these ends up being more than what you anticipate, are you kind of thinking about that and planning for that? And are you able to absorb any additional costs that might be associated with this?
Yeah, I think that's another piece that we would need to model out. So I talked about how we're going to be working with a vendor to help us design this program, right? And with somebody to help us design this program, and that would be one element that we would build in. As I mentioned before, for children, we already have a grant-based support program for children that have disabilities or other reasons that they need additional supports to be safely included in childcare. And so in those cases, we might actually be taking something that right now looks like 4 grants and making them into 1 grant or 1 contract. So there might be some places where we're actually simplifying and streamlining. But yes, depending on how big this gets, there might be other places where we're needing, it is a significant, would be a more significant lift for the business office. And, we will need to, think through the business processes and the payment processes on that list.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I guess I would say if something I think because this can be a scale up, and this is one of the things that we did talk about internally within DCF and with the finance office too, is, if it turns out there's something that, I don't know, for some reason we feel like we want to go big right away, we could think about whether or not there's something next year, like in the Budget Adjustment Act or something like that, if we wanted to do that. But I think that the way it's designed, it'll give us enough flexibility to pilot things and get a better sense of what the capacity is that's needed before any larger scale up. Yes, that is where we were when we sort of stopped. Are there any other questions on that particular element of the proposal or of the proposed statute changes?
I'm seeing any, Janet?
Okay. So the next section where we have changes is down in section 3, talks about payments to providers. And so one of the requirements that federal requirements through the Child Care Development Fund now is that they're asking us to begin to pay providers prospectively. So right at the beginning of a service period versus at the end after the services have been rendered. And a lot of the federal rules related to childcare payment processes are really geared around making sure that the payment practices and payments are similar for children who receive childcare financial assistance or childcare subsidy to those families that are just paying privately. Because the interest of the federal government, it seems at this, at the time these rules were written, was really to make sure that even the children that have subsidy still had access to a wide variety of childcare programs, and that they, even though they were receiving some financial assistance. So that's sort of like the broad intention of this. So they always are they're often making changes that really point us to direction of, is this similar to how this would be handled to sort of in the private pay sector of childcare? And for people who paid for childcare before, most of you know, right, your payment is due before at the beginning of the week or at the beginning of the month, not at the end of the month. And so this is that change, is to pay at the beginning of a service period. So what we have, there's kind of a mix here. What we have proposed is to eliminate the words that say something about reimbursing providers and just switching it to paying.
Mhm.
And then I think that so we got where reimbursement was said twice, so three times. So we sort of got rid of that and just said payment.
Mhm.
I will say your ledge counsel, Katie McGlynn, did an excellent job by adding in the extra sentence that said the payment schedule shall ensure timely payment by requiring the payment in advance of or at the beginning of the delivery of childcare services. So that is really explicitly putting into state statute what the federal requirement is. We are starting to do the planning associated with this change, and it definitely, to pay at the beginning will require us to update the CDDIS, our information system, right? Because right now payments are triggered based on an attendance report, not based on not based on an enrollment at the beginning of a service period. And so we're going to need to, we need to update that within the IT system. We need to work with the business office to figure out what does that mean for how they manage payments and deliver payments out. We're going to need to update some of our program integrity policies and practices, right? So the program integrity, right, is where we look at the payments that we made and we choose a certain percentage of them each pay period and determine and like test them and look at them and then pull up an attendance record, look at the payments, try to make sure that nothing unusual has happened. It's just sort of the regular audit that we're doing to make sure that payments are proper. And then sometimes obviously program integrity is also, we might get a complaint or need to do an investigation. We're looking into things more specifically. But we'll have to update those program integrity rules, have to figure out, have to develop the process for if a child unenrolls during that time, how do we want to handle that? So there's going to be a decent amount of work associated with implementing this change. We are still in the process of like scoping it out with our IT vendors. We don't have an exact time frame. We're hoping for kind of late 2025 is when we're hoping that we would be ready to implement this change.
And this falls in the same compliance timeline as the other one, which is August of next year.
Correct. So it
Okay.
does fall in the same compliance timeline, but these are pretty big changes, right,
Yeah.
to the IT system. And, we have to roll them out in stages, just in the way that just the workflow will work. And this one seems like one of the more direct, the assignment is pretty clear, so we can get to work on the implementation. Whereas something like we were talking about the grants and contracts thing, like the assignment's kind of vague, so we have to like figure out the plan first and then figure out the design and then do implementation. In this case, the sort of the initial design questions aren't as complicated, and so we think we can implement this one first. Like I said, I think it's going to be December of 2025. I think our initial thinking was that we should just get rid of the language that refers to reimbursement and just do the paying thing, so that we have the flexibility to do it either as payment either before or in the current way we do it, which is at the end of a service period. The sentence that says this payment shall ensure timely payment, if there is an implementation deadline of July 1st for that one, we wouldn't be able to make that officially as of July 1st. So we would either, if that sentence stays in there, I guess our request would be either if that sentence stays in there, we went with even a January 1st implementation deadline. And if we were a few weeks early, that'd be great. If we're a couple weeks, that would, I don't think anybody would have a challenge with that if we moved to change practice a couple weeks, a little bit early. So that one would be, like I said, sort of looking closer to a January 1st implementation deadline, or it would be whether or not we just didn't include that sentence and we just moved to sort of the more flexible language regarding paying. Because this is a federal rule, like the state could make changes even though it conflicts with the statute, but that always confuses people when that is the case. The other reason to have some of this in statute is because the Child Care Development Fund rules officially apply to those children who are eligible for support through through federally funded Child Care Development Fund, which we have a large contingent of children for Child Care Financial Assistance who are only state funded because they're above the income limits for the federal funding. But we definitely don't want to have two different payment methodologies based on the funding stream of a particular child, right? We need the same plan for all of the children. What questions can I answer about that one?
I have a question.
Steady.
I have a question for.
Go ahead.
Chair or Vice Chair. Is there any money involved with this particular bill or just changes?
Just change.
Okay, that's it. I'm just a money person.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'll just add to this. Sorry, just to that. I don't think. I mean, there is the business office is by moving to paying in advance, right? We will move up one payroll, right? We'll have one time where we need to pay both at the end, we have to pay double once, right?
But monies you already have, nothing.
But yeah, it shouldn't. I mean, it's not a big change. I mean, I think that was a question Nolan asked me yesterday if he thought there would need to be the Joint Fiscal Office asked me yesterday if they thought there would need to be a fiscal note on this bill, and I did say, look at this part. I don't think that there needs to be a fiscal note, but there could be. But again, it would be a one-time, and it would really be a timing consideration.
Well, I vote basically a lot no on any increase. So right now, as you think, It's already with current funds that you already have.
So this is a really technical question related to the timing of cash flow within state funding. And so that's why we would want the joint fiscal office to take a look at this, and they would tell us if there's an impact, but it's nothing major. It wouldn't be a major impact by any stretch. It would just be, a one-time change of timing on payments.
Thanks, Janet.
Thanks.
It sounds to me like it's not a budgetary change of any sort on beyond budget. So it sounds like it's fine. I probably this question for the vice chair. I just need to understand if, as Janet was explaining, the language already exists in federal guidelines or federal law, whatever. What's the purpose of us restating the same thing in Vermont statute?
Make it consistent.
Just so it's there. There's
no questions, or as Janet said, there's sometimes confusion when federal rule is not consistent with, these are fairly new rules that
we're just bringing things.
We want to bring our law around childcare in alignment with.
Okay. Yeah. Good.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Wait, I've got one more thing to say, Ray.
Go, sorry.
I just wanted to flag the final change is on the last page here, which talks about payments shall be based on a child's authorized enrollment. So we're adding the words to a child's authorized enrollment. And the reason that we're recommending this change is because it does align with some of the language that's used on the federal side of it, but also because we've gotten there's been a lot of confusion from people within the field about what does it mean to pay on enrollment. And there's folks that have just said, well, you know what I mean, when the child is enrolled, that's when it means you pay, right? Or it means like we as a childcare program have said that child's enrolled, therefore that's when you pay. And it's like, no, it's about when they're authorized to be paid for by the childcare financial assistance program. And then there's also been people who have said, my enrollment is 25 children, so now you're going to pay me on 25 children. And you're like, well, no, it's about the specific child and their specific circumstance there. So it's just been a little bit confusing, and we thought that it would be helpful to just add those 3 extra words, could make it clear that when we're talking about enrollment, we're talking about, again, a child's authorized enrollment in the program. And then that language does reflect the language that's used on the federal statute or federal rule more closely. So that was just the request there. That one is for clarity. It doesn't change. It doesn't change anything.
And Janet, can you just explain how often is a child's enrollment authorized? Like, how often is that happening?
Yeah. So children do need to, or families and caregivers need to reapply for childcare financial assistance every 12 months. So, it's no less than 12, like they get approved for a period of just a little bit over 12 months each time. And then at that point in time, their eligibility specialist will reach out in the system. Also the IT system sort of reaches out to them and says, it's time. And we ask for, at that time, we're asking for some updated documentation. We don't ask for updates of the documentation that's the same. Like, we're not asking for your birth certificate again and your, like all that stuff. But we would ask for updated, especially it's really updated income information, or if your service need is that you're enrolled in school or training, right? We need, updated documentation that confirms that you're still enrolled in school, that kind of stuff. So, but it's every year.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anything else from you, Janet?
I don't think so.
Great. Thank you very much for the information, and we're gonna continue our work on this bill, I'm sure in the next week. We have, yeah, I think next week we might have markup on this or discussion. Appreciate you coming back and rescheduling so quickly, and we'll see you soon.
Okay, thanks all. Take care.
Thanks.
Take care, thank you.
All right, committee, I think that was it for our